So this is talking to Gerry Brownlee about Christopher Hipkins coming out and finally, in my opinion, calling for a ceasefire. Of course, the hubbub was that he shouldn't have done it because he was the leader of the opposition, who was also the acting prime minister. But this is how it's been set up, that he approached the incoming prime minister, who said they'd get back to them, who then didn't get back to them, who we know is sitting on the fence now about Israel and Gaza. And then they gave them a heads up they were going to do it, not as the prime minister, but as the leader of Labour. And so that's the heads up for the story. And this is Gerry Brownlee responding to that. There's one really important part for you guys to hear and see that tells all you need to know about National and calling for a ceasefire. And I'll point it out when it comes up.
For the standing Prime Minister to break out and speak out on behalf of the party. You're calling Mr. Hipkins out. Why?
Some of politics. You know, what I've responded to is his suggestion that we were consulted and disagreed with their position. The reality is that on Friday.
So he's responding to them not disagreeing. So therefore, do you agree, Mr. Brownlee? So he's responding to that with Hipkins saying that we disagree with his position, right? That's a part of it. Really important to hear what he says.
There was a change from that position that Mr. Hipkins was articulating in your opening comments. And we asked for what was the MFAT advice, that's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade advice at this point. They came back with a lengthy document. It had 3 options in it. And we preferred option 1 in that, which was that we move in lockstep with Australia and Canada, of course wanting a ceasefire, of course wanting an end to hostility.
So he's saying National wants a ceasefire. Do you get that, Chewy? Of course wanting a ceasefire. Hang on. Isn't that what Mr. Hipkins said? He says, of course wanting a ceasefire.
But recognising that there are steps that need to be taken to get there, and that we want to support that process to get a good outcome for the appalling situation that's on the ground in Gaza.
Yep, so you want a ceasefire, but
yep,
we had Christopher Luxon on this program previously. He hasn't directly said that that's what he is calling for. So is that National's position?
The position is we think that the various conditions that need to be met by both parties here. But
this is the really important part, right?
Fuck.
No, just stick with me. This is really important, and this will show you exactly what National's doing. Conditions that both parties need to adhere to. That's what he said, right? He said that National's position, we'll go back and get it word for word, but I'm paraphrasing it. National's position is calling for the ceasefire, but there are some conditions that both sides need to meet. Have a listen again.
The position is we think that the various conditions that need to be met by both parties both Hamas and the Israeli Defence Force, need to be recognised and worked through. One of the problems you've got, of course, is that Hamas is a terrorist organisation. So who are you negotiating with, I guess, is a bit of a problem. But we have heard, and the Washington Post was reporting yesterday, that a 5-day ceasefire might be, or a slowdown, if you like, might be possible. And we would certainly welcome that. And the outcome everyone wants is to have a complete end to these hostilities.
You mentioned conditions.
This is the perfect question. So Jenny May's going to go, what are these conditions? Because remember what he said. I'm going to remind you of it, even though he's just said it, that both parties, there are conditions that both parties, that means Israel and Hamas, need to meet for the ceasefire. Both parties, Jenny May is about to ask the perfect question. What are those conditions?
In your last answer, and in a release that came out yesterday, it says National supports the goal of a ceasefire, but acknowledge that conditions have not existed for one so far. When you talk about those conditions, what are you talking about?
Remember, the conditions, as he said, that both parties need to meet. Now, Chewy, you might be surprised. Gerry Brownlee is now asked to expand on what are the conditions that both parties need to meet. He's very forthcoming with the conditions that Hamas needs to meet, but guess who he doesn't talk about having any conditions to meet? The other party. So on one hand, he's saying both parties have to meet the conditions, but when asked to explain it, all he talks is about the conditions that Hamas needs to meet.
Mr. Brownlee?
Primarily the release of the hostages, and the
Which hostages?
stop using the population of Gaza as some kind of human shield. It's look, the whole situation is utterly appalling.
That's it.
And there needs to be a recognition that
Hold yourself, Chewie. I'll come
the
back to you in a
terrorist
sec.
organisation that attacked Israel in the first place is now using the people of Gaza to further their own ends. And I think, supposedly in support of them, and that those sort of things need to be set aside. There does need to be a dialogue, and the saddest thing is that a lot of people are dying while all this is going on.
Now, I didn't want to cut that last answer short because I didn't want someone to then say to me, well, he would have mentioned the conditions later on. He said very clearly there are conditions that both parties need to meet. Jenny May, please, Mr. Brownlee, explain the conditions that needs to be met. Well, Hamas has to do this and this and this. I thought it was both parties. And unfortunately, Jenny May didn't follow up with the question, which I would have done. Okay, so that's the condition of Hamas. What are the conditions that Israel has to meet? Now, let me make this clear for you people out there who think we are pro-terrorists. Again, we have stated blatantly and openly that what Hamas has done is an act of war. Put it on the table. However, if someone's going to say, a politician's going to say, now, Labour has said they want a ceasefire. What do you want? And then it's basically say 20 different ways we want a ceasefire, but refuse to say the words we call for a ceasefire. 20 different ways say there's responsibility on both sides, but only points to one side. Then that is a bias within this new upcoming government that is pretty scary to me, Joey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Hamas are going to do this, and this. IDF must cease combat operations for a period of 5 days, 6 days, whatever. Yeah. They must allow aid convoys through, fuel, food, medicine. They must release the civilian captives that they have in Israeli prisons at the moment. There's lots that you can say there. They all seem to be tripping over themselves that if they don't frame this in the right way, that will be an international pariah. And would have all fucked up it. These guys think that New Zealand is too small to matter. But then when it comes to something like this, are paralyzed by the potential for saying something incorrectly. If they keep this simple, you can do it. You can just go, we call for a ceasefire. Why do we need to wait for Australia or for Canada? Like, we're our own country, right? We set our own foreign policy. It's a good idea to run things past our friends and allies, absolutely. But Brownlee started by saying, oh, we'll just say what Australia and Canada say. They'll tell us what to say.
And what if they call for a ceasefire? What will you do then?
It's very difficult. There's lots of moving parts. Yes, we know there's lots of moving parts in a negotiation in this. It's a notoriously difficult part of the world. You don't need to talk about it. But you can go, ceasefire now. Don't care how. We want a ceasefire because every day that this continues, more children die. That's the statement.
We've got another clip to play with Chloe Swarbrick talking to David Seymour from one of the breakfast shows this morning. And look, we are going to go beyond 10 o'clock. Obviously, it's a Monday. We always do. I wasn't going to play any more of that interview, Chewy, but you've just said something that's caused me to have to play the last kind of 70 seconds of it, because guess where he goes? He goes almost exactly what you've just said. What do they think New Zealand will say about all of this?
Mr. Brownlee, I just want to wrap things up. And yesterday, Chris Hipkins says it's been 5 weeks. I would have articulated the Labour Party's position earlier, but I have been caretaker Prime Minister. He went on to say he's been waiting 5 weeks for the government to sort itself out. And in the meantime, he has been unable to speak out, given his role as the stand-in Prime Minister. Doesn't he have a point here? There is a real unrest here in New Zealand about a lack of response from our major parties. And isn't this a time to show leadership, Mr. Brownlee?
Yes.
Well, 2 points. There has been continuous response from the caretaker government.
I think you mean from the Greens. There's been continuous response from the Greens. I think that's what the Greens aren't the caretaker government, Mr. Brownlee, but that's what you mean to say. There's been a continuous response from the Greens
and the incoming government. And that is what Mr. Hipkins was articulating at the start of your article today. The second thing is that it didn't prevent him from going out as Labour leader and taking a position yesterday. I think that
Well, then shut the fuck up about complaining about it. You've just said he can do it. He's done it. So what are you whinging about?
the difficulty yesterday was that his accusation that we had not supported a ceasefire. Of course, we want a ceasefire, but I think recognise that New Zealand is not going to be one of the countries that can make an immediate difference here. We have to be in lockstep with others
so
that we are moving towards the goal that we all want.
Exactly. We're too small, so why bother? Mr. Brownlee.
Fucking pathetic.
Nuclear free in the 1980s, following your idea. Doesn't matter. What about anti-apartheid marches in the 1980s? According to your principles, can't do anything. What about women in the vote? According to your principles, doesn't matter. Can't influence the world. And I'll tell you what, I didn't feel this earlier, Chewy, but I'm fuming. Like, I'm actually really, really, really angry right now because this kind of bullshit, and Chloe Swarbrick does a very good job in a minute of interviewing David Seymour and asking him questions that the media won't. I don't want to criticize Jenny May because it's a media thing. Big, big, big holes in the conversations. Like, I could never, not that I would ever get asked, but I could never work for a plus like this because I don't know how I'd stop going, you're fucking kidding, right? Are you fucking serious? Like, I just don't know how you wouldn't do it. Like, dude, okay, so you've said about Hamas. What about Israel? No. Come on. You said both sides. You said both sides, both parties have conditions. What are the conditions of Israel? And let me say this: people will criticize this as being oversimplified. If Israel said it's a 5-day ceasefire, right? If one rocket comes across the border before the 5 days is up, then we're resuming. Or if the prisoners or the hostages aren't released by the end of that 5 days, then we're resuming. Then you know what? People like me, I'm not saying I would jump in their camp straight away, but I'd be like, well, what do you expect, Hamas? They gave you the opportunity and you couldn't do it. I'm not saying that would solve everything, but they just won't. They just will not do it, Chewy.
Wait, you've listed off a lot of the political aspects, so you've forced me into a corner of listing off all the sporting analogies. You know, we're a small country, so there's no point in hand building a motorcycle and taking it to the salt flats and breaking a land speed record.
Yep.
You know, we're a small country with no money. There's no way that we can compete in the America's Cup. I mean, it's called the America's Cup. Why bother? You know, it's just we love the plucky can-do Kiwi story, don't we? Until it fucking matters. And then National just they tuck their little bollocks up inside their body and they go, we can't say anything lest the bigger countries think poorly of us. You know, we must wait for our colonial overlords to tell us our position. For fuck's sake.
Even Elva didn't like that analogy, that visual imagery you gave.
No, Gerry Brownlee, he is currently, according to me, the holder of the collective National Party testicles. They're inside his body now.